moving to panel
You're
number
doing a
two.
great job as moderator. Thank you.
No, thank you, Andrea, and thanks to each one of you, Matthew, Dania, Andrea, Valentina, and Lawrence. Thank all of you for being with us and sharing your ideas. You've been at this a long, long time. My first time on the continent was 1976, and I enjoyed, and I've been working with Africa ever since. So it's exciting what's happening.
You're welcome, and thank you too. Thank you.
We thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go to panel number two. Mary, we're going to move forward. This is the role of culture and art in community healing, peace building, and reconciliation through intercultural conversations. And I'm going to state a little bit of this topic, and then we're going to go to Guy directly. But this whole thing of culture and arts, why is this so important on the African continent when we're talking about infrastructure development and hard assets and all that? But we're getting into the soft side of this as far as peace building, reconciliation, and community healing. So, Guy, you're here with us. You're talking about the role of culture and art in promoting peace, and you have your full 10 minutes. So thank you for being with us. Mary, have we put up Guy's bio?
Okay, thank you so much.
I am putting it up now.
Okay,
so.
all right,
Yeah.
let's get his bio up. He's a very important man, so we can't
Sometimes
miss
I like
that.
to think that the
Okay.
reality tells us otherwise. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Basically, you say I go straight, I don't need to talk about me, so my bio is over there. So anyway, when we talk about culture, it's a concept that a lot of people is not very clear. Actually, there are a couple of definitions, and what I would like to say today is that when I see culture, it is set off all the things that allow a specific group to identify itself as the other. Okay, so in terms for us human beings, we have been on this planet for a very, very long time, and we somehow, anywhere across the globe, we need to make sense of the world. Okay, if not, we could not sleep, we could not, you know. And in order to make sense of the world, we have to create a structure, and that structure is the thing that allow us to kind of have what I call a normal life. So that's what, and those could be the belief system, right? It could be the belief system. It could be a set of a way of doing things, the way of treating each other, and all those things are what we call culture. The way of expressing myself, the way of engaging. Mm-hmm. And so even sometimes the way of differentiating ourselves when we talk about others, even though technically we all know that there's no difference between different people and communities. So that's what culture, that's how I define culture. All the set of rules and regulations and principles that allow us to make sense of the world. So, and then there's another topic. Now we talk about the culture of peace, the culture for peace, which is a concept that has been championed by UNESCO. And many of you know the UNESCO was founded after following the Second World War. And one of the principal mission was for the UNESCO was to use education, science, culture, and communication to make sure that we don't have a third world, because it was a common understanding that
Guy, you're muted, sir.
I don't know from what time. Right now or just
no, you need to go back about one paragraph.
Okay. Okay. Edit. So anyway, I think I'll go back to what UNESCO, after the Second World War, when what we call the New World Order was being established, people realized that it was very, very important to put in place a structure that are going to make sure that we human beings do not see each other just because we do things differently, to see each other as enemies or adversary and things like that. We may not necessarily do things the same way, but at the end of the day, we're all the same. So they created this UNESCO, was a structure in the UN that was going to use education, science, culture, and communication to make us realize that at the end of the day, we are all the same. Okay, and in the preamble of UNESCO, there's these words that say that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defense of peace must be constructed. And that's exactly, I think one of the panelists actually mentioned that, making a reference about, everything starts in the mind of men. So when we go in that mind, what do we see? A culture, art becomes something that's very, very powerful. I like to take this example. I travel across the globe. Most countries I go there, I don't know the language. What people do usually, they have someone to translate to me, to interpret. But guess what? When it's a piece of art, I don't need translation, right? Piece of art, when you have beautiful music, even we don't understand the words, but you can feel it. And those are things that transcend the little things that intend to make us. And the other concept, beside the term of culture, then there's a new concept, the culture of peace. UNESCO has been championing the culture of peace, and one of the major things that the United Nations General Assembly, I think it was September 13, 2099, came out with the concept, the culture of peace and nonviolence. And they have a whole decade. That was 2001 to 2000, from 2001 to 2010 was the decade for peace, culture of peace and nonviolence. During that time, the whole humanity was encouraged to really find creative ways to avoid conflict. I like sometimes, like I said, sometimes we don't look very far, and we just look not far from our nose. I'll take an example. You'll see the Muslim will be praying by, looking down, and they will see someone praying by looking up, and they will have the illusion that, oh, they must be different because one is looking down. But we know that when we look at the universe, a circle, there's no down, actually, technically, literally, there's no down, there's no up, right? So culture is the things that allow us to really know that we are each other's brother, we are each other's sisters, and we need to find ways to work together. And art is the thing. The other day, we discovered a piece of art that was more than 5,000 years old. And science today can allow that small piece of art to go back to allow us to travel back in time and go in this and see how these people used to interpret the world. And that's the essence. We are all mortal. We like to say, none of us are going to be here 100 for now. But there's a way to transcend that mortality by creating a piece of art that is going to be there tomorrow to tell us, to tell people how and why we used to live. So that's why I think it's very, very, very important. And we talk about culture of peace. It's about just developing techniques to allow us to learn from one another, to know that, to have a clear understanding. I have a professor of MIT that came to one of the programs organized last time. We're talking about war and peace and things like that. They say, what? There's only peace in the world is not going to be solved because two countries that came together and signed a treaty like we used to think in the 19th century. Peace is going to come when there's no scarcity, when nobody is worried about not having a house, if nobody is worried and say that if my son, my daughter, my children, get sick, how am I going to take care of that? Peace is going to come natural when socioeconomic challenges are no more. So that's why I'm joining. I'm very happy to work with Mary and and others in this concept of bringing a new concept of Marshall Plan to help Africa, because again, peace is going to happen. It's going to be something totally natural when people have something to eat, where people do not worry, things are not scarce anymore. And the last aspect I wanted to talk about is the fact that many have actually alluded to that. Understanding that it does not matter the concept of race, ethnicity, talking about this migration. And then the professor clearly stated that, yes, one of the things we have to realize we are all the same. Because at the end of the day, we are able to duplicate ourselves. We are able to, people that are not the same could not procreate. And you know that the procreation between two human beings, go and find someone from the furthest part. It doesn't matter how physically these are two distant two human beings, you put them together, guess what? They're going to be able to procreate. And that alone is something that tells us that regardless of this color that we have, regardless, we are all the same. So that for me, it's the future. The decade for peace, the culture of peace and nonviolence has taught that is that if we, as a human being, started developing on education, at the same, someone was identified as one of the ways for us to have a brighter future, and spending a lot of resources on education to learn about each other, to support each other, to know that our security is linked to someone else's security.
Hi, 1 minute.
Yeah, we cannot be safe and secure when our neighbors is not. So when we come and understand that we are here to support each other, we are going to be able to create that world, the world where we are going to live in harmony and peace. And the way we do that and sometimes express ourselves is to be creative. And that's where art becomes the one thing that will bring all of us together. Because when you see a piece of art, we don't need someone to come and tell you what it is. It's our humanity in that. And that's going to live even when we are not here anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going right into the Colombian peace process. This is something I do know something about, as we've been working on this under the auspices of Pinella, which is the ancient cane of Colombia and the Andean range. So do we have the bio for Louis, Mary? Can we put that up, please?
Yes, it is.
Okay, there it is. Louis, welcome to the program as far as Watch Democracy Grow. And tell us how democracy is growing in Colombia and the importance of the Colombia peace process, maybe as a best practice for the African continent and around the globe. And thank you for being with us. And give us about 1 minute of your background, please.
Yes, so he speaks Spanish. We have a translator amidst us.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Ira?
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por esta importante invitación. Agradezco a los organizadores de este evento por habernos invitado y por hacernos parte de esta magnífica experiencia. Conmigo una gran amiga y colaboradora, Mayra, quien me acompañará para poderme comunicar mejor con ustedes.
Thank you very much for this invitation to the very important event. I'm so grateful. Congratulations to the organizers. It's been marvelous. And here we are helping him with the translation. Luis Fernando Niño has been a professor for more than 18 years. He's a doctor in history and art, and he's been working really close to the former and actual president in Colombia with the process of peace in his work, and he's been taking his students into these processes in the different universities he's worked with. Luis Fernando.
Ok, Mayra. Queremos compartir con ustedes esos caminos de construcción de paz que hemos recorrido en nuestro país, Colombia, que hoy seguimos construyendo y que queremos armar una pedagogía que sirva para el mundo en la manera en cómo se resuelven los conflictos mediante el diálogo y la pedagogía para la paz.
Today we want to share with you what being peace building roads in Colombia is been. So it's a process we have lived for many years. We're still working on them. We have learned something in the process, and today the idea is to share with all of you our experience. But the most important part of this experience is to use pedagogy in order to learn from history and teach new generations about this building process.
Lo primero que debemos entrar a considerar son las diferentes dinámicas que ha tenido el conflicto en nuestro país. Inequidad, pobreza, histórica e inequitativa propiedad de la tierra, la falta de una reforma agraria seria y equitativa, las minas antipersonas, el conflicto armado interno entre los diferentes grupos que aquí existen, la producción y tráfico de drogas y muy profundamente la falta de educación y de oportunidades para la gran mayoría de la población. Este es el ámbito en el que comenzamos a construir la paz.
So we start building peace with the dynamics of the conflict. It's important for we all realize what those dynamics are. They are inequality, poverty, but lack of education is the highest situation we have been forced to feel. And the internal war, we living with the different armed groups, has taken also the population to suffer from the lack of opportunities and the production of drugs and traffic. So everything related to poverty because of our lack of education. Luis.
Para ello, entonces, después de más de 5 procesos, se llega al último en La Habana, Cuba, en donde como país garante se dan las negociaciones con acompañamiento de Noruega desde septiembre del 2012 hasta el 24 de agosto del 2016. Allí se ratifican 5 acuerdos y con una premisa de que nada está acordado hasta que todo está acordado. Esta paz se firma con el grupo de las FARC, uno de los grupos que lleva más años actuando en nuestro territorio, y luego por medio de un plebiscito y referéndum se vota para que este acuerdo fuera ratificado en Colombia. Este es un acuerdo que ha sido acompañado por todos los países del mundo y que sigue siendo de una manera un ejemplo de la justicia transicional.
Well, after having experienced more than 5 different processes to reach peace, the final one was signed with the help of many countries in the world. It was Cuba, Havana, Cuba was the place chosen to have the meeting for the final peace process agreement, and Norway was one of the main helpers. In this negotiation, the referendum was signed thanks to the help of the different countries, many countries which help us in order to get the final referendum. And November the 30th in 2016 was the big date for signing.
Dentro de estos elementos, hay uno que es muy importante para poder construir la pedagogía, y es la verdad, la justicia y la reparación. Liberar del dolor y del pasado a esa población que sufrió los rigores de la guerra, promover un futuro deseable, generar cambios sociales de base, inspirar la reconciliación y, por supuesto, construir la paz y la confianza para que el tejido social vuelva a darse en el territorio en el cual estábamos trabajando.
4 main aspects were the most important in this process for the referendum. We have 3 of them over here, which are through justice and reparation. In order to promote change, which is the main idea in our country, build peace and confidence for new generations to avoid them to suffer or living again the situation we have lived by That's why pedagogy is very important in here for new generations to learn about our history.
Desde la construcción pedagógica de la reconciliación en Colombia, propiciamos garantías y condiciones para la reconstrucción de la memoria histórica. Esa memoria histórica nos ayuda a reconocer el derecho a la verdad, la participación de las víctimas del conflicto, la no repetición de los hechos victimizantes, pero ante todo el restablecimiento de la dignidad de las víctimas del conflicto armado.
Through pedagogy and building, promoting bonds, we got the right to learn the truth in order to avoid living the same situations we have passed by. So the idea is to offer dignity to people, promote guarantees, offer the right to learn about the truth, give the victims the opportunity to participate in the process, learn about history in order to avoid repeating the same events, and restoring dignity.
Con esto entonces queremos compartir que la construcción de paz hace parte de los procesos en los que toda la comunidad participa, y es ahí el punto clave de que la paz se vuelva realidad.
All the community, we are expected that all the community take part in this process of building peace in order to reach the peace as a real situation in our country. To make peace real, it's important that all the community take part of it in this building process.
Louis,
I
you have
want
one
to
more
give
minute.
thank you
One more minute.
for Halloween. I
Okay.
want to give thank you for Halloween, man, to participate in an important event for sharing our dreams of reconciliation. I'm from Colombia. We remain committed to construction of peace with hope to continue being and the broader people with Africa and United States. Say you some fraternal bonds. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I think that's good. So you finish in English.
Oh, okay. Louis, have you finished?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And we'll come, I'll have some more questions. Have no fear. Okay, we're going to move on to George. Concerning Rwanda as a case study for reconciliation. And Louis, I think you're just talking about that. And Guy, thank you for responding back to him. Mary, do we have George's ready, his bio ready to post up? Mary?
Yes, thank you so much. I am actually standing in for George. George is
Oh, you are?
Oh,
okay.
yes.
You have multiple tasks today. Okay,
That's
Mary,
why I'm in the
please.
dark corners, because I am going to present on Rwanda and
Okay.
reconciliation in Rwanda as a case study.
Okay, 10 minutes.
10 minutes, yes. My
Okay.
name's Mary Uwera, and talk of spelling. I lived in Uganda. They used to call me Wera, and I was good with that. When I reached here, they called me Mary U, and I'm very good with that.
Yeah.
So
Mary you.
that also has taught me how to be diverse. So anytime there is an error, I don't faint because I've lived it. So what I will talk about is the reconciliation process in Rwanda, and I will just be brief. Before we talk of reconciliation in Rwanda, true reconciliation is always retrospective and proactive. Retrospective meaning you look back, and proactive you take measure, which various panels have always discussed on issues of how to change things in their countries, from the case of Ethiopia, the case of even Rwanda. I will just give a short history of Rwanda. Rwanda traditionally according to traditional history, it is alleged that the first settlers of Rwanda were the tribe called Twa, who were migrating from the central region of Congo. Then the next group which came was the Bantu group, which is usually the Hutu or the Bahutu group, who came in around 15th century. And then the last settler of Rwanda were the Batutsis, who are all called Tutsis. So each of those, you have already highlighted important topics in as far as how we occupied Africa or different countries of Africa, and the issues of ethnicity and race. And I would define that before actually we go for issues of ethnicity and race, there is what they call social stratification. To me, I think social stratification is actually the one element that brings the issues of tribal, ethnicity, and race, because social stratification divides communities along three elements: power, which is influence; economic resources, which is wealthy and access to wealthy; and then the influence goes hand in hand with the what you would call privileges, which privileges end up building status in the community. So traditionally, Rwanda was occupied initially by the Twa, who were at their level of civilization then, were nothing but hunters. Then later on, the Hutus came, who were a little bit sophisticated with additional experience in agriculture. So basically, they now have introduced the art of agriculture into Rwanda, which never existed there. And then we have Tutsis who came later, who were nothing but pastoralists. So basically, when you are talking of food and food production and sustaining an economy of a country, that is the contribution done by the Hutus, really. And when you are talking of dairy and meat production, that is also a contribution brought in by the Tutsis. Not without also considering that whether by accidental or whether it was where they used to live that they had a better structure in terms of leadership. I want also to put this, that the leadership of Rwanda originally was structured by the Tutsis, because the initial kingdom of Rwanda was started in 1090, and that was under the ethnicity group of the Tutsis. So why am I bringing in those kind of things? I'm bringing in the whole notion, which I'm going to bring the concept of reconciliation and actually what I would call, the topic was supposed to be the Rwanda's magic, the majestic, and the madness. So the magic is that Rwanda has had a fantastic culture, which really in a way unite. That's why when people say, how did it happen that Rwanda reconciled so quickly? First of all, there was no much tension that we are fighting over. The issue is because of political influence. Leadership, Andrea has already said, leadership swinging between Republicans and the Democrats. In Rwanda, it swings between Hutus and Tutsis. So traditionally, Tutsis ruled the country until independence, which was 1962. When independence came, I wish the people who took independence had corrected the errors of the monarchy, just like US established a democracy that was going to be strong for everybody to see or to find themselves in. That was not the case. Again, remember, power is the only thing which makes everything rotate around. So what they did, they empowered the Hutus not to govern the country, including the Tutsis, but they had to expel Tutsis. For your own information, remember, Tutsis ruled that country from 1090 to 1960. We are talking of hundreds and hundreds of years. There's no way you can eliminate such a person or such a community, because that is like uprooting the history of that country. Rwanda wouldn't have existed had it not been that group of people. So independence comes and the so-called democracy comes at that time. But there is no correction of considering the protection of minority, which Dunia has already mentioned, but we have the expulsion on the notion that the Tutsis had ruled Rwanda through a monarchy. So we have now from 1962 to 1994, that is predominantly a Hutu regime. So we have the invasion of RPF, who are going to take over, which was basically a return of the Tutsi ethnicity group into Rwanda. So then we have the genocide. In my assessment, I usually say genocide of Rwanda was not because Tutsis hated the Hutus. No, it was nothing but an insurrection of not wanting to lose the power. And you're like, since we have lost, we'd rather at least out of human envy, because remember the Tutsis were coming back and they had Tutsis inside the country. So instead, since we can't hold the power, at least let them not meet. Literally, that was the cause of genocide. It's not because Hutus hate Tutsis. No. No. So we are now into reconciliation. For reconciliation take effect in Rwanda, first of all, reconciliation comes because there was a challenge, there was a disagreement. So for that disagreement to end, there must be a dialogue. And in 1994, there was launching of Truth and Reconciliation in Rwanda, which was opening dialogues between the two groups. What happened? How can we fix it? And to the fairness to the current government, at least it is the government which has tried to hold the two into leadership. Is it perfect? I don't know. But to me, my argument is that if reconciliation is going to take place in countries which are having ethnicity tensions, I talk of Cameroon, I talk of Ethiopia, I talk of even Rwanda, there must be inclusive democracy, there must be rule of law, which means actually those countries don't need, it's not a question that it is fashionable for them to have democracy. It is a necessity for the minority. Remember the population of Rwanda, 14% are the Tutsis, 85% are Hutus, 1% are Twas. In a true democracy, do you anticipate that ever Hutus or Twa will ever live in that country with rights? No. So a working democracy has to be promoted in Rwanda, not because it is a foreign concept, but for the well-being of those communities. So how did the reconciliation in Rwanda take place so quick to yield the success that we see? And I'm going to share just a video for 2 minutes, and then I will wind up my discussion. Wait. I have another one here. Uh-huh. Are you sharing? Are you following? All right. Did you follow? Okay, one moment.
Yeah, I'm not able to see it, Mary. I'm not sure if everyone else is either.
Let's see, because it's we are putting it from the source.
Okay.
And I think that's where the problem is. What is going on here? Well.
Good music.
Yeah.
It's not the tape I want.
I
I have
enjoy
very
that music.
many.
One thing you can also do, you can just post the, you can also post the link to
that's
the
the
YouTube
thing.
or whatever
That's the
on
thing
the
I
on
wanted
the
to.
on the group on the chat. Yeah, you can get the link to the chat.
It's the one I wanted to. Let me post the link to the chat, because that when I'm getting a long one, and the long one is going to take forever, and we are out of that time. But to just come to the conclusion, what I wanted to say is that that reconciliation in Rwanda was possible because of culture, partly. The Rwandan culture, which is mixes all the three tribes. And when it comes to music, we all find ourselves there, you know. It's like what makes us, you will see, I hope it is now coming. You wanted to say? Do you see?
I'm not able to see it, Mary.
Really?
Music is coming through loud and clear, but not the image.
Do you see it now?
Cannot.
No.
It's okay. It's okay if we can't, because it's a long
Yeah,
one.
I would just post it in chat and then
It-
take it
yeah.
off.
Yeah,
Let's
we
just,
can.
let's just leave it there.
Yeah.
It's okay. I
And,
will just
they can
narrate
take it
what
off
I
on their
wanted
own.
to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
The link is in the actually in the chat.
Yeah, we
Right.
got it.
So what I wanted to say is that what became like a backbone of reconciliation was the fact that we realized that the nation state of Rwanda has to be bigger than that. From who came first, who came last, who oppressed the other, but who took over after. And the good thing is that thanks to either Europeans, while we said that they did harm, they balanced the political structure of Rwanda. It gave from 1962 until the invasion of RPF, at least the Hutus were able also to lead, right? So at least there is that notion that it was no longer only the Tutsis who led the country. We have them come also in the chapter. And I have my friends whom will just joke, and I'm like, you know, one thing we can say, but we didn't, while there was repression, but we did not do genocide. So go correct the genocide, and then we'll give you more leadership. in a joking manner, just to make all. But the issue is, Rwanda as a country belongs to three ethnicities. They all contributed to it. Tutsis cannot say, oh, well, we brought leadership. Oh, well, without food, you wouldn't have survived, right? So food agriculture also was possible. Rwanda right now is, when they say the economy is doing well, I want to remind you that majority of contribution comes from our counterparts, the Hutu. And the Tutsis now have learned how to cultivate. Before, they never knew. We have Hutus who have learned also to do cattle raising. Originally, they never used to do. With education, which we are talking about. Here, do I have cows? I have zero. As a matter of fact, I usually tell people I'm an urbanized Hutu. And to conclude the discussion, I think you can only be able to correct a mistake when you articulate it rightly. I don't believe in the notion. After 1994, I was into this kind of notion of saying that, no, I am Rwandese. No, Rwanda is composed of three ethnicities, and we can only protect if we know who we are protecting. We should know the percentage of the Twas. We should know the percentage of Tutsis, and we should see them also freely. We are talking of freedom of existence, them existing and being able to be there, and the Hutus also. So there shouldn't be this kind of notion of assimilation, absorption. No, it's needed. It's healthy. God wasn't crazy when you created that. Of all regions, we have, these are going to be either black or white. God was very, very divinely thinking of all of us to be there. So I'll conclude my my discussion there. And thank you so much, moderator, for the 10 minutes. I hope I haven't gone beyond.
You did, but we're waiting on the music. Let's close out here. I think these were very complete presentations, and I think people have a clear understanding of the role of culture and art. Louis, as far as the Colombian peace process and why it's so important and how it's been evolving there. And then what you were doing, Mary, as far as Rwanda and the reconciliation. So I'm going to have just one question, 1 minute each, and then I think let's go on into panel 3. Mary, Guy, looking at the culture and art, how can we utilize those skills and also the small business development aspects of that to promote peace? And 1 minute, please.
Okay, thank you very, very much. The one thing that I would tell a very quick story and then to illustrate that fact. There was a gringo, an American that went to, it's a story, that went to a country where he saw someone making a nice piece of ice. Oh, this is beautiful. How much is it? The guy said $1. He said, wow, this is amazing, right? No, I want to make 1,000 of them. Then the guy said, no, if you want 1,000, I'll charge you $10 per piece. The guy said, no, that's no way, because, you know, I'm American, I want to make you money. Then he says, you know what, you know, doing one, I love it, it's my passion. Doing 10 or 1,000, no, this is really crazy. So I think when we take a piece of art and stop making it something, a commodity, but rather make it something that is unique, that can translate a message, that can share our hope, our fear, and everything else. I think if we do that, and reward those who are doing this instead of just trying to make money out of those things, I think that will help us as human beings. So in the interest of time, I'll just stop there and say that yes, art is a way for us to keep our culture, to send a message to the next generation, to actually be deaf, right? We are here talking about all these amazing artists that live the world 10,000, you know, and so many years before us. And that is how we can do that. And then art can also help us equalize, it's equalizer. We don't find out who did it. Whether it's big man or small man, no. It's a way to make us all equal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Louis, are you still with us? And Maria as translator?
Myra, yeah.
Okay, looking at the Colombia peace process, what do you think is the one strongest aspect of that peace process, which has been very helpful to Colombia and maybe could be extrapolated or shared on the African continent to states that are currently either in conflict or attempting to resolve conflict? What do you think the main idea that came out of the Colombia peace process that could be replicated on the continent? And 1 minute, please.
Luis, ¿cuál sería el aspecto más importante del proceso de paz que debería ser replicado en diferentes países? Por favor.
To the moderator, I will suggest you go to Mary so that they get ready by the time you come back.
Okay,
Myra
that's
can just tell us
no
that
problem.
This will
Yeah.
save a time. This way they
Got it.
can, because you can answer to her and then she just answer in her chat.
Yeah, you got it.
He's giving-
Mary, going to Rwandan case study as far as reconciliation, of the things that you shared with us, again, going back to a similar question to Louis and the Colombia peace process, what do you think is the one thing that really compelled Rwanda to go through reconciliation, and why you think it actually has lasted in these years following?
Thank you so much. The first thing that made Rwanda think of reconciliation was to realize that the population of Rwanda was the structure of the population of Rwanda, which I have already given.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, there is no way one was going to eliminate the other from the country. That's number one. They all were supposed to live there. Number two was the fact that based on the composition of the Rwanda's population, There was nowhere democracy. That is why 1962, it was so easy to overlap the majority of 90% of only Hutu ethnicity revolution, because 85% is such a big figure in democracy that it can change a lot. But thanks to that also, we should know the different talents that we all can bring on the table. Trust me, you would fight with the Tutsi until the eyes get out, but they are notorious warriors. So what they also bring on the table, right from within the kingship, was protection of Rwanda. I remember actually, which made again an issue that realized the fellow, the other tribe realized that, like it or not, the Tutsis, you can't get them out of Rwanda. Therefore, we have to live together. That's a whole fact. That's number one, realizing that we had to live together. Two, realizing that each one is gifted or is strong in two different capacities, and therefore embrace the diversity which different discussants have put there. Three, it is a new day. There is no more monarchy. The world is now of a democracy. Let us get that democracy which is going to protect the minority and protect also the majority. But the third factor which was vital, General Paul Kagame at that time, I think, was needed for the Rwanda's reconciliation process. A Tutsi who was going to be a moderate, and also who was not into, who was willing to teach the returnees that the issue of land which they had left was not going to be reclaimed. You had the right to settle where you are supposed to settle and take it from there. So land issue was such a reconciling factor, because the notion of genocide, as I put it, it was the insurrection that, oh, are they coming for land? We know they are coming for power. We remember power, I said it's influence, and influence means where we can reach, but is also going to be that they are taking over economic area, and that was not there. So that drives me to the question that if reconciliation is going to continue and Rwanda is going to be stable, just like George Washington was very brilliant to know that a young nation that had just been formed separated itself from a giant British master, but also had to thrive in terms of future generation to try and fail and maybe come in. I think the current administration should be also thinking again to see how they can leave a legacy, a peaceful legacy that could continue that reconciliation. Not that the general has not done good work, no, but for the purposes of harmony and tranquility. If it goes more than 30 years, it's actually disadvantage to the Tutsis. And now I will own again that word, saying that, oh, they were the first conquerors of the place, now they are taking over. So you need to balance that. And therefore, democracy is what would sustain reconciliation in Rwanda. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Back to Lois and Maria. Lois, have you shared with Maria what we should know about the Colombia peace process?
Yeah, here.
And what one thing may be the most helpful as far as the African continent. And thank you, Maria, for being with us and your very kind translation, and Louis working with you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so the most important is releasing the injured parts of the past in order to promote a new future for new generations, inspiring reconciliation. Because what we need is to build peace based on trust, to work on building our social tissues in Colombia.
Okay, thank you very much. And
I would like,
Louis
can I just
for
have
being with-
10 seconds, please?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, just so I think what I heard Mary, I heard what Louis said. The one sentence that I like to share all the time is that none of us is as good as all of us. I think that for me summarize what I've heard from all of them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Guy, I think you're absolutely correct. That would be a good summary for all of it. Thank you for being here, Louis. Thank you, Maria, for your translations, and Mary for being George. this afternoon. Thank you very much. Quite articulate. And with George, in the future, if you can hear us, we look forward to having you with us. We're going on right into panel 3.
Okay.
And this is what's called COVID impact on communities in general, a call for a global social justice as a new focus to facilitate a healthier world. And Mary, do we have David's profile to put up? Mary?
Yes, Herschel is on. We can give a chance to Herschel.
Oh, okay, Herschel, you want to go ahead and start with Herschel?
Yes.
Okay, Herschel, thank you for being with us earlier and sharing your many words of wisdom and also your postings as far as chat is concerned. So we're going to kick off with you on this whole notion of COVID, its impact on various communities, and how do we bring about global social justice and a healthier world at the same time. 10 minutes, please.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right. I'm sorry, I did a switch over right here, and it doesn't. There we go. All right. We just held a workshop called The Return in Senegal. And we held it on health solutions, which Dr. E is going to present just a second. It was based on the backdrop of one, the African Union reached out to people of African descent worldwide in the African diaspora in 2012 with 5 projects, of which the most important in relevance to these conversations is the African Diaspora Financial Framework. This month, by the 28th of this month, we're submitting that framework based on over $298 billion worth of bank-based Federal Reserve community benefit agreements that are in existence right now. The biggest one with PNC starts in 1 January. Chase has already committed to Black and brown folk $30 billion. We're talking, when we had this seminar, and what we're talking about now is right now. And for the United States, as of right now, is that the United Nations, by September 13th, we're going to have a permanent forum on people of African descent, all 1.6 billion of us, versus the African Union's 1.3 billion in the United Nations. So we're in a unique opportunity here in America, based on the President's Executive Order 13985, to create solutions for the Biden 2022 budget based off of what he's executing right now, not only from the budget perspective, but from the American Rescue Plan perspective, where there's funding in that to create multilateral support. And we were on a conference call with Commerce on Friday, and they look forward to this group and others coming together to do this. And so when Mary asked us to add a session, I did this on the basis that we accept the idea that this group is working with the United Nations through Guy's organization on a peace track. We have just finished a session at the Indigenous Peoples Forum, which we're going to be publishing our letter to them and our cover and our work in the Indigenous Peoples Forum on April 29th. that deals just with these issues that you're talking about in terms of ethnic or tribal warfare. And we now have the platform in which to use that, because there's only 375 million people out of the 7 billion people represented in the Indigenous People Forum. But when this new People's Forum for people of African descent comes together, that'll be 1.6 billion people. So what we did in this Indigenous Peoples Forum is that we formed an Indigenous Peoples Alliance based on the work in the African Co-op that would represent 4 billion people. And the great thing about it is that here in the United States, that we can go to our federal government to leverage this based on being aware of what our government has the ability to do, not where we were 2 years ago, where we didn't know that the United States government was a signature to the Treaty of Berlin. So thereby we have standing. Not knowing that we didn't have an agreement and there was a process for an agreement with the African Union, and where the AU-EU agreement talks about migration, that we can talk about it as the most wealthy people of African descent in the planet. We have a GDP that's stronger than Mexico, even after COVID. And that we can bring to the table groups like the fellowship I'm members of in the African Scientific Institute Fellowship, who is ready to stand at the table to first make sure Africa is fed. Now, to do that, we've already engaged the USDA to do that in Foreign Agricultural Service and et cetera. So the platform framework is there. Now, we do reject rampant capitalism. We believe in the SDGs and the Global Compact and SDG 17 and a public-private partnership that corporate social responsibility. The problem with Alexander Hamilton and the Wealth of Nations, it may have been good for colonial America. It may have been good for the United States then, but it was a problem in the second. Remember, there's 2 United States out of the Declaration of Independence. There is that which came about in 1777, which was failing, and that which is in 1789, which we operate under now. And Hamilton proposed this in 1791 to deal, yes, with those debts. But among those debts, okay, was the genocidal African program of operation of the United States of enslavement. And so within that context, we deal with that within the context of how we work with the United States around the whole issue of 1776, where earlier it was talked about that we don't talk to each other. Well, we can talk to each other by creating a common history, and we create that common history that is peer reviewed based on the
and
2018. I'm sorry?
Sorry.
I assume that was you calling me, Mary. Okay. So that's based on, and I'm sure I'll give the rest of my minutes to Dr. E if he's on. Okay. But what we have proposed already to the United States government is that we conduct and create a history of 400 years based on the January 8th, 2018 African American Commemoration Act, which commemorates the first 20 Africans who landed in the English colonies that were going to become the United States at Point Comfort on August 25th, 1619 to August 25th, 2019. so that we have a commonality and we have an economic model, that economic model will show our history. And then we would have a model to stress test two different viewpoints, which is one viewpoint is rampant capitalism. One viewpoint is corporate social responsible capitalism, which is a difference, a world of difference between the wealth of nations of colonial America and the 21st century America that, if it wants to survive, has to partner with Africa and the Americas. Thank you.
You say that 36 seconds ahead. Thank you very much for that. Has David joined us, Mary?
I am assuming he's on.
David, are you here?
Okay, then we
How
can.
about Gabo?
If not, I have his presentation.
Is
Oh,
that
that is
Herschel
his
again?
group. That is the Herschel's contact. So
Yeah, okay.
I'm assuming, yeah. Thank you,
Okay.
Herschel. If you have his presentation, we would appreciate.
Yeah, Herschel, why don't you go ahead? Just keep going.
Okay, well, if you share it with me, I will see if can you see that?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Let me, so Partners in Health is on the basis of a community worker model. And the whole idea of a community worker model, okay, let me just, yeah, okay. So you should be able to see that fully.
Yes, we can.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
It acts on the belief that the best way to guarantee high quality, dignified care is to rely upon and invest in local health systems. And again, what I was talking to you about in terms of this finance from America to put in place is in the process of doing that. And so the question becomes, what does building a healthcare system look like? All right. So, you know, we give requirements, but the key thing is that together with our groups, with the doctor is the health vice president for the World Conference of Mayors. And one of our members in our health task force is literally building a university healthcare system, a universal healthcare system for the state of Oregon. And so based on that and the work of the African Union, all that is required is the role of communities. And so you have to understand that even the best clinics and hospitals are insufficient in guaranteeing care if people can't access them. Now, when we talk about access in terms of transportation, one of the people who's in charge of that for us is the vice chairman of the regional sort of transportation. And so that's why community health workers are key to building strong health systems, because they have a personal relationship with the health consumer to make sure that, think of them as a concierge, a trained concierge. They are the bridge between communities and clinics, finding the most vulnerable among their neighbors and accompanying them through the care process. Domestically, we do that with the Cancer Justice Network. And Partners in Health has operations all throughout the continent that is based on this model. And often that care extends beyond the medical and addresses the whole patient. So domestically, on the call on Friday, like I said, with the Department of Commerce, which has the only agency that does business exclusively for minority businesses, and also has a comprehensive economic development strategy from the EDA. As they made aware, there's funding available. So when a mother cannot undergo cancer care and lose work without receiving economic support, and a tuberculosis patient cannot endure strong medicines on an empty stomach, and a patient showing symptoms of COVID-19 cannot take public transportation to her local testing site, then we put in the solution. which is a social work-based solution that is a trained local, the people in the community by providing food to cash transfers to transportation to housing. Partners in Health stays true to its mission to do whatever it takes to ensure health is a human right for all. Now, we in our organization, FAU, we have adopted not only the SDGs, but a superset of them, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of finance in the public-private, utilizing the UN Financing for Development model, but is now implemented in Africa by the ministers of finance, the central banks, and a request for proposal. So Partners in Health delivers high-quality healthcare where it does not exist and assures every person's right and ability to survive and thrive. PIH fights and prevents diseases by treating the whole person. So we have a unique opportunity to demonstrate this, building on the PIH, which invests in clinical education for its staff. As mentioned earlier, education is a primary factor to change the over 480 million young people's lives in Africa. And based on the work in the United States of competitiveness with China relative to the global infrastructure for 5G, we proposed December 3rd, 2020, our own version of a Belt and Road program from the United States. We now have the hearing to be able to do that, and through PIH, which advocates for national and global health policies that prioritize rather than marginalize. And so the whole idea of building this program around the Universal Periodic Review of Nations, which every nation goes through. The United States is in its process for its third round. We have 2 demonstrations other than the United States, Nigeria and Mexico. And so the whole idea is to stop it based on the fights of bias and dogma, and in terms of create rigorous evidence-based results that supports national governments and other partners in sharing its approach to equitable access for dignified quality healthcare. And one of the reasons that we had a participation in the Gambia was that the Gambian government, in a total of less than 90 days, built a 66-bed hospital in response to COVID-19, and that there's a whole range of services and support that we can do for evidence-based results. And the Gambia is also the headquarters for the African Union Human Rights Institute. And through PIH's University of Global Health Equity and its teaching hospitals, PIH prepares the next generation of social medicine practitioners and global health leaders. And like I said, I talked to my fellowship, the African Scientific Institute Fellowship, of over 2,000 hard science and technologists, which is inclusive of the president of Senegal. That, and combined with Partners in Health, will be able to deliver high quality healthcare because the technology behind it actually runs domestically. The Veterans Administration currently now serves 9 million Americans currently. And where it does not exist, that we can put in place, ensuring every person's right and ability to survive and thrive. And so it's a partnership with PIH, which fights to prevent diseases by treating the whole person, that we can invest in clinical education for staff and all kinds of health professionals based on an already established infrastructure in operation. And that advocates national and global health policies that prioritize rather than marginalize. And so the World Health Organization is one organization that has said that African continent will have a shortage of more than 6 million healthcare workers by 2030. The Black Folks Plan for Africa addresses that as part of what we call the return. And in terms of the transfer of wealth from people of African descent in the United States over the next decade, which was about $4 trillion transfer of wealth between intergenerational during that decade here in the United States. And for that, for the return of those, this is an executive order. And let me repeat from the United States position. It is an executive order. Now, I met with Senator Brown on Tuesday. And Senator Brown is the current chairman of the House Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs.
Herschel, you have 1 minute left.
And so together that we can bridge the gaps, build strong systems, provide life-saving care that meets all the requirements that I heard today on a track that develops peace, that develops equity, that addresses biases, and that we can put in place based on adopting a superset of Agenda 2063, Agenda 2030 in the midterm review that's going to happen in the United Nations General Assembly on July 22nd, 2021. I look forward to working with all of you. My information is previously in the chat. Thank you very much.
Herschel, thank you very much. David, we'll get to you as a final question. I think Herschel did a very nice job presenting your organization. Dr. Mindy, you're here, correct? Dr. Mindy?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
perfect.
Mary, if we can post his bio, please. And Dr. Mindy, why don't you go ahead and talk about your Global Hearts of Missions, please?
Global Hearts of Medical Missions is a project that's undertaken by a group of medical missionaries initially, but basically, and who have been coming to the Gambia since 1999. They built a medical unit in Gambia in 2010 until 2011. Unfortunately, they were kicked out of the country, but despite that, they still continued coming to Gambia because they believe that there's so much that can be done. And as a result, being a Gambian physician trained in the US, I met the founder and really the heart of the organization. And my promise was that we will make it happen. In essence, since then, we have a project called the Gambia Underdog Program for Health. It is really reimagining the health sector in Gambia by bringing together service, education, and workforce development. I've heard about, initially, Dr. Vivian was talking about the issue of human capital. And in healthcare, especially as you note also with Partners in Health, you cannot do it without building the next force of healthcare workers, not only physicians, nurses, but also allied health, and extending it to the community. Without the community infrastructure, there is no way that services, especially prevention and wellness, can have a larger uptake. So the idea of the Global Hearts of Medical Mission is to build the largest network of private sector hospitals ever in the Gambia, significantly raising the bar for national and regional healthcare quality, design in a way that will bring on academic care, wellness, and prevention and curative medicine in one area. But most important is to reduce the brain drain of trained physicians, because they will be trained in the country and end up leaving to go somewhere else. How do we do that? We do that in the sense that we don't only build in the urban areas, but extend it throughout the region